All right, so get this for today's deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
You actually sent us in a ranking
Oh, wow.
of the top 5 wars that shaped America.
Okay.
And the idea is that these wars led to American greatness.
Interesting.
Bold statement, right?
Yeah.
We're talking the American Revolution,
Mm-hmm.
the Civil War, World War I, World War II, and the Cold War.
Okay. A lot to cover.
So much to unpack here.
It really makes you think about how we even define greatness as a nation, right?
Right.
Is it purely about, military victories, or is there more to it?
Yeah, and can we really call something great
Mm-hmm.
if it comes at a huge cost?
Definitely something to consider.
Like take the American Revolution.
Okay.
I mean, it's literally the origin story of the United States,
Yeah.
establishing those core ideals of liberty and self-governance.
Freedom?
Yeah. And it even inspired a bunch of other freedom movements all over the world.
That's true.
So on the surface, that kind of seems like greatness.
It definitely laid the groundwork for the nation we know today. But it's important to remember that those ideals
Yeah.
weren't exactly a reality for everyone at the time.
Right.
Like slavery and indigenous rights were pretty much ignored.
Yeah.
And that kind of set the stage for conflicts down the road.
Oh, so you're saying.
It's almost like greatness back then was more about like potential
Yeah.
than actual achievement.
Okay, so maybe greatness needs a few updates,
Uh-huh.
as we go along.
For sure.
And speaking of updates, the Civil War really tackled one of those big contradictions head on:
Okay.
slavery.
Right.
I mean, ending that horrific institution and preserving the Union.
Mm-hmm.
Those are undeniably huge wins.
Yeah.
Plus, the North saw some major industrial growth during this period.
Absolutely. The abolition of slavery was a major moral victory,
Yeah.
no doubt about it. But the human cost was just staggering.
Oh, yeah.
And even though the Union stayed together, the failure of Reconstruction
Right.
meant that true equality was still a long way off.
It's true.
The South was devastated, and racial injustice continued to be a problem.
So it makes you wonder
Mm-hmm.
what kind of greatness leaves behind those kinds of scars.
It's a good question.
Look, let's fast forward to World War I.
All right.
Now, the U.S. joined in late, but still played a key role in the Allied victory.
Uh-huh.
This led to a booming economy and established the U.S. as a global military force.
Yeah, but on the surface, it looks good.
Right.
But we can't forget the devastating impact on Europe.
Okay.
Millions dead, economies in ruins.
Wow.
And this really set the stage for future conflicts.
Oh, wow.
The Treaty of Versailles was supposed to prevent another war,
Right.
but it actually caused new tensions, especially with Germany.
Okay.
And back home in the U.S., there was this wave of isolationism,
Yeah.
and events like the Red Scare showed that even victories
Mm-hmm.
can have some pretty messy consequences.
So greatness for America,
Yeah.
but maybe at the expense of global stability and even some of its own ideals.
It's trade-off.
It's getting more complicated. Now, World War II is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The U.S. comes out of it as a superpower after defeating fascism.
Uh-huh.
And there were some major technological advancements, too.
That's right.
Penicillin radar, the jet engine,
Mhm.
all spurred by the war
Well,
effort.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that greatness in this context
Yeah.
is tied to some incredibly difficult ethical questions.
Okay.
I mean, think about the atomic bombs, the
Yeah.
internment of Japanese Americans.
Yeah.
These actions really challenge the very values
Yeah.
that the U.S. claimed to be fighting for.
So even in a good war, with what seems like a clear victory,
Mm-hmm.
the path to greatness is full of moral dilemmas.
Definitely.
This is not your typical history lesson.
Not at all.
Right. And then there's the Cold War.
Okay, this one's different.
Totally different.
This wasn't a traditional war
Right.
with clear battle lines and victories. It was a decades-long ideological struggle with the Soviet Union.
Right. A constant back and forth on a global scale.
Exactly.
And our source material highlights the U.S. championing of democracy
Mm-hmm.
and its incredible technological progress during this period.
For sure.
Space exploration, the internet. Those were huge leaps forward.
Those are undeniable achievements, but the Cold War also cast a long shadow.
Okay.
Think about it, the constant threat of nuclear annihilation hanging over everyone's heads.
Oh, yeah.
Proxy wars fought on foreign soil, and even tensions back home.
Like
McCarthyism, which eroded civil liberties in the name of national security.
we haven't even gotten to the details of each war.
I know, right?
And already this idea of greatness is starting to feel well, a lot less great.
Yeah.
It's almost like every step forward came with a hidden price tag.
That's exactly why this deep dive is so important.
Yeah.
We need to look beyond those simple narratives
Okay.
and explore the true costs and complexities of these conflicts.
Right, because ultimately understanding the nuances of the past is essential for navigating the challenges of the present.
Absolutely.
Right, deep divers, buckle up.
Yeah, get ready.
We're just getting started.
This is just the beginning.
In part 2, we'll dive deeper into each of these wars,
We'll get into the nitty-gritty.
exploring how those hidden price tags continue to impact America today.
It's going to be good.
Stay tuned.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back, deep divers.
Mm-hmm.
Last time we started exploring this listener-submitted list of wars that supposedly led to American greatness.
Yeah.
But, like we discovered, it's not as simple as it sounds.
Not at all. It's about going deeper,
Exactly.
looking at the long-term consequences.
Both good and bad.
Yeah.
So let's jump back into the American Revolution.
Okay.
It's interesting how this fight for liberty and self-governance still resonates with people, even centuries later.
It really does.
What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, the Declaration of Independence,
Right.
with its focus on equality and those natural rights,
Yeah.
it's had a huge impact. Not just in America.
It's worldwide.
Yeah. All over the world, it's inspiring.
It's still inspiring people.
Movements for freedom and justice to this day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But as we talked about before, the reality on the ground back then
Yeah.
was a bit more complicated.
Yeah, a little bit.
Slavery, for example,
Oh, yeah.
was a pretty glaring contradiction to all those big ideals.
Yeah. And not just slavery.
Right.
The treatment of indigenous peoples, too.
But right.
The revolution might have brought in this new era of self-governance.
Yeah, for some.
Yeah, for white Americans. But it didn't really address
Well,
these basic injustices.
these issues that continued.
Right, which just kept going
Yeah.
for generations.
It's like those seeds of future conflict were planted
Right there,
right at the beginning,
at the very start.
which brings us, I guess, to the Civil War.
Yeah, where those seeds really bloomed.
Yeah, fully bloomed.
Totally.
As you say that.
The Civil War was like this direct consequence
Yeah.
of the compromises made.
During the Revolution, and when they were writing the Constitution,
Right.
it was this bloody reckoning with the whole question of slavery
Okay.
and what it actually meant to be a nation.
Yeah.
That said, it was founded on equality.
Our source material really emphasizes the failure of Reconstruction after the Civil War.
Yeah, that was a pivotal moment.
Can you explain a bit more
Yeah.
about why that attempt to rebuild the South and integrate formerly enslaved people into society ultimately didn't work out?
It faced so many obstacles.
Okay.
You had this fierce resistance,
From our
Southerners
wanted to.
determined to hold on to their power
Yeah.
socially and economically,
Yeah.
and the federal government's commitment
Yeah.
to protecting Black rights, it wavered over time.
They weren't fully committed.
Not really, especially as the North got tired of dealing with the South's problems.
So it seems like achieving true greatness requires more than just winning a war. Yeah, it's bigger than that.
It takes a real commitment
Yeah.
to addressing the root causes of that conflict.
Right.
And making sure
everyone
everyone in society benefits
exactly
from that victory.
Yeah.
Okay. And this theme of grappling with unintended consequences
Right.
continues
Yeah.
as we move into the 20th century with World War I.
World War I.
Remember, the U.S. at first
Yeah.
tried to stay neutral
Tried to stay out of it.
in that European conflict.
That's a European war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But our source material points out that America's late entry
Right.
really made a difference
Yeah, it tipped the scales.
in securing that Allied victory.
For sure.
And there's no denying
Uh-huh.
the economic and military benefits that came with that involvement.
No doubt. But it's important to remember that this greatness came at a huge cost for Europe.
Right.
I mean, the continent was devastated.
Just devastated.
Millions, dead infrastructure, destroyed economies and ruins.
It's hard to even imagine.
And the war also led to the collapse of empires,
Right.
which created these power vacuums,
Yeah.
contributed to future instability.
And then, of course, there's the Treaty of Versailles.
Oh, yeah.
The treaty,
It was supposed
it
to
was meant to bring peace.
lasting peace.
Yeah.
It kind of backfired.
It did the opposite.
Yeah, the
Mhm.
treaty, especially how harshly it treated Germany,
Right.
it created this resentment
Uh,
and laid the groundwork for these extremist ideologies.
Like Nazism.
It's like a classic example
Textbook case.
of how those short-sighted solutions
those quick fixes.
and backfire.
And make things work.
And create even bigger problems down the line.
Down the road.
So World War I really highlights how interconnected everything is globally and how these seemingly isolated conflicts can have ripple effects.
Yeah, they spread out.
Way beyond the countries directly involved.
It's like throwing a stone in a pond.
And the ripples just keep going.
Yeah, they keep going.
Exactly.
And this becomes even more obvious when we look at World War II.
Okay.
A conflict that really tested America's resolve.
It did.
And its capacity for greatness on a global scale.
It was a defining moment.
There's no denying
the
crucial role that the U.S. played in defeating fascism.
Absolutely.
But as we discussed earlier, even this good war involved really complicated moral decisions.
Yeah, tough choices.
Like the atomic bombs.
Yeah.
And the internment of Japanese Americans.
It's true. World War II forced the U.S. to really confront that tension between its ideals and the reality of waging war.
On that scale.
On a global scale.
Yeah.
The sheer scale of the destruction.
It's unimaginable.
And the unprecedented technological advancements raised all these ethical questions.
That we're still debating today.
Still talking about.
The source material mentions America's isolationism leading up to World War II.
Yeah, they wanted to stay out of it.
Right. It's interesting how that reluctance to get involved in foreign conflicts,
to jump into the fray,
eventually led to the U.S. becoming a global superpower.
Yeah, it's a real shift.
It's a huge shift.
And it shows how America's role in the world was changing.
Okay.
World War II was like a turning point.
Yeah.
Where America couldn't just sit on the sidelines anymore. They had to step up as a global leader.
With all the responsibility.
And all the complexities that came with it.
So we've looked at 4 very different wars, each with its own unique challenges and outcomes.
Yeah, each one unique.
But one thing they all share is this idea that greatness is a very multifaceted concept.
Yeah, it's not one-dimensional.
It's not just about military wins.
Or economic growth.
It's about how a nation deals with adversity, upholds its values, and navigates all the complexities of its role in the world.
It's about the whole picture.
Exactly. And maybe no conflict really embodies this complexity.
More than
the Cold War.
The Cold War.
Unlike the wars we've talked about, there weren't any clearly defined battle lines.
Yeah, no front lines.
No decisive victory.
It was a different kind of war.
It was a decades-long
struggle.
Ideological struggle with the Soviet Union.
A war of ideas.
Yeah, fought on multiple fronts.
Espionage, proxy wars.
Right.
And the constant threat of nuclear annihilation.
And yet, our source material suggests that this was also a time of amazing progress.
Oh, yeah.
In areas like technology and civil rights.
It's interesting how those things coexist.
How do we reconcile those seemingly contradictory parts of the Cold War?
I think it's important to realize
that
the Cold War wasn't just this abstract battle of ideas.
Yeah.
It had real consequences.
Yeah, it did.
For millions of people.
All over the world.
All over the globe. Those proxy wars, for instance,
right,
caused so much suffering and left lasting scars on those countries.
One specific example from the source material that really stood out to me was the Berlin airlift.
Oh, yeah.
You have the Soviets blockading West Berlin.
Trying to cut them off.
Yeah, trying to force them to surrender.
Basically starring them out.
But the U.S. and its allies.
Right. They
did this incredible thing.
Yeah, a massive airlift.
They airlifted supplies into the city for over a year.
It's amazing.
The Berlin airlift is a perfect example.
It really shows.
Of how high the stakes were during the Cold War. And the lengths that both sides were willing to go to.
Absolutely. It also highlights the ingenuity and determination of that time.
It was a different time.
Remember, this was a time of incredible technological advancement.
Yeah.
Driven in part by that Cold War rivalry.
Right. The space race.
Yeah.
The development of computers. Even the internet.
All of that.
Can be traced back.
Has roots in the Cold War. And even though the Cold War ended.
Right. With the collapse of the Soviet Union.
In 91.
In 1991. Yeah, its legacy
it's still felt today.
Continues to shape our world.
It's amazing how a conflict that ended over 3 decades ago,
over 30 years ago,
can still have such a big impact on our lives.
It's pretty incredible.
What lessons can we learn from the Cold War?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is the danger of unchecked power.
Okay.
And the need for countries to work together.
Yeah.
The Cold War was a really paranoid time.
Yeah, a lot of mistrust.
So much mistrust, and it almost led to nuclear war.
Several times.
Multiple times.
Yeah.
We can't forget those lessons.
Especially
as we face new challenges in the 21st century.
You know, when we started this deep dive into wars and American greatness, I had a much different picture in mind.
I bet.
I was thinking more about battlefield victories, technological advancements, the U.S. becoming a global superpower.
The classic image.
And while those are definitely part of it,
yeah, they're in there. We've seen that there's so much more to the story.
It's way more complicated.
Greatness.
Yeah.
It's a complex
and often messy concept.
It's about facing challenges, making tough choices, and dealing with the unintended consequences of those choices.
It's about the whole journey.
It's about recognizing that progress often comes at a price.
Yeah.
And that true greatness isn't just about winning. It's about how a nation learns from its mistakes.
Yeah.
And tries to build a more just and peaceful world.
That's the real measure.
All right, welcome back, Deep Divers.
Back for more.
We've reached the final chapter.
The grand finale.
In our exploration of greatness and the wars that shaped America.
That's right.
And we saved the most unusual one for last.
I had one out.
The Cold War.
Right.
It wasn't really about, like, conquering land.
No, not in the traditional sense.
It was more about winning hearts and minds, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, exactly. The Cold War was this global clash of ideologies between these two superpowers, who had totally different visions for the future.
It really was a war of ideas.
A war of nerves, too.
Oh, yeah. Constant tension.
Yeah, it played out in so many different ways.
On so many different fronts, yeah.
Espionage, propaganda, proxy wars.
Our source material highlights the U.S. championing democracy.
Right. Freedom and individual liberty.
During this time, but it also mentions that constant threat of nuclear war.
Oh, yeah, that was always looming.
And all the proxy conflicts fought in places like Korea and Vietnam.
It's important to remember that the Cold War wasn't just this abstract battle.
Right. It wasn't just theoretical.
It had real consequences.
Devastating consequences.
Yeah, for millions of people.
All over the world.
Those proxy wars, for example, caused immense suffering.
And left those countries with lasting scars.
Definitely.
One example from the source material that really stuck with me was the Berlin airlift.
Oh, the Berlin airlift.
You have the Soviets trying to blockade West Berlin.
Right, cutting them off.
Trying to starve the population into submission.
Basically trying to force them to give in.
But the U.S. and its allies,
they stepped up.
They did this incredible thing.
A massive airlift.
Airlifting supplies into the city.
Keeping them supplied.
For over a year.
Amazing feat of logistics.
It really shows you the high stakes.
Yeah, the tension was palpable.
And how far both sides were willing to go.
To win, to achieve their goals.
But it also highlights the incredible ingenuity.
Yeah, the resourcefulness.
And the determination.
That really defined this era.
This was a time of huge technological innovation.
Oh, yeah. Fueled by that Cold War competition.
The space race, the development of computers, the internet.
All those things have roots in the Cold War.
It's crazy to think.
It is fascinating.
That the Cold War ended over 3 decades ago.
Yeah, over 30 years.
And yet,
its impact is still felt.
It's still shaping our world today.
The tensions with Russia, the nuclear proliferation, the challenges of globalization.
All these things
have connections to the Cold War.
So what are the big lessons we can learn from this?
I think one of the most important is understanding the danger of unchecked power.
Okay.
And the absolute need for international cooperation.
We need to work together.
The Cold War was a time of extreme paranoia and mistrust.
Oh, yeah. Almost brought us to the brink of nuclear war.
Multiple times, we can't forget those lessons.
We have to remember.
As we face the challenges of the 21st century.
You know, when we started this deep dive into wars and American greatness, I had a much simpler idea in my head.
I bet.
I was thinking about battles won and technology advancing.
The U.S. rising as a superpower.
But it's clearly so much more than that.
Greatness is complicated.
It's messy. It's about confronting challenges.
Yeah, making difficult decisions.
And dealing with the unexpected consequences of those decisions.
It's a journey with twists and turns.
It's about realizing that progress often comes with a cost.
And that true greatness is about more than just winning.
It's about learning from our mistakes.
And trying to build a more just and peaceful world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question to think about.
Okay, I like it.
What does American greatness actually mean to you?
Yeah, think about it.
Is it about military strength, economic success, or is it something deeper?
What's the true measure?
How can we learn from the past?
The good and the bad.
To create a better future.
It's an ongoing conversation.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring.
Keep questioning. Keep learning.